Whispers of Ilyra. Part 1. The Archivist of Wind and Bone. Welcome, you've returned to Arithrea, a world of broken time and drifting stars, where silence is older than sound and memory outlasts stone. Here, cities do not always rest on land, and some kingdoms cast shadows upon the clouds. Tonight, let us rise above the storm line, where the very air shimmers with threads of memory, and drift toward Ilyra, the skyhold of thousand wings. Ilyra does not float. It breathes. A living archipelago of hollow bone isles, grown from ancient Leviathan remains, shaped and woven by the windbinders over centuries. Their roots, thin as silk and strong as steel, trail like drifting hair across the endless sky. Suspended far above Arithrea's ever-turning lands, the skyhold moves with purpose, not by the will of storms, but by the currents of thought and history itself. In Ilyra, wind is not weather. It is language, power, prayer. It is memory. The girl's name was Ilyra, though few spoke it aloud. Her title was Bonekeeper, the lowest order of the memory archive. She was small among the feather-cloaked figures who passed her in the floating corridors, a reed in the gale, unseen except when summoned. But in her hands, calloused, ink-stained, precise, rested the most delicate of duties, to dust the wind-swept bones of Ilyra's ancestors. And listen, bone archives were not libraries. They were altars. Each rib from the founding Leviathans held songs carved not in words, but in breath. To trace a bone spiral was to awaken the wind-threaded memory buried within it. Some bones whispered lullabies of harvest festivals and starlit dances. Others wept of betrayals and broken pacts. A few still screamed, echoes of wars fought in the sky when Ilyra's wings were young and unsteady. Ilyra had learned to keep her soul soft, to feel without drowning. That morning, the air was strange. The sky around the archive shimmered, a silver-blue haze, like thought frozen in motion. The wind pulsed irregularly, speaking a language she'd never heard before. And within the marrow of Bone Spiral 18, the forgotten third rib of Leviathan Kael'Torin, there was movement. That should have been impossible. Ilyra paused, her brush, spine prickling. The spiral hadn't sung in over a century. Its last memory was sealed by the High Archivist after a vision drove two windbinders to madness. But now it hummed. A low, longing note that pressed gently against her skin, like a tide waiting to pull. She leaned in, breath held. Listened. A voice. Not memory. Not past. Present. Dreamwalker. It whispered. The winds are bleeding. Ilyra is falling. Find the wingless air. Then silence. No echo. No sigh. Ilyra sat back, cold all over. In Ilyra, visions were currency, but forbidden ones were treason. She should have gone straight to the circle of feathers, where the windbinders convened. Should have reported it. Instead, she found herself walking, not through corridors, but across the skybridge lattices that connected the ribs and wings of the living city. Her destination, the outer islet of Mare's Wing. There, amid the Elderbone Gardens, lived Selenvar, a dream sovereign in exile. They called him mad. Said he wandered too far into the cloud realms where thoughts had color and time had taste. He spoke to birds, shadows, and sometimes stars. But Ilyra knew one thing true. He listened better than any soul in the archive. She found him sitting on a high bone ledge, feet dangling into the mystic blue. Selen, she said softly. The archive stirred. He did not turn. You've heard it too, then? Her breath caught. The spiral? He nodded, slow. And the voice. Not from below. Not past. A wind of elsewhere. Keorava is falling, Ilyra whispered. He finally turned. His eyes, opal gray, with swirling centers, met hers. No, he said, voice like rustling paper. Keorava has already fallen. We simply haven't remembered it yet. She shivered. What is the wingless air? Selen's face darkened, dream light retreating from his skin. A myth. A curse. The child born without sky in their blood. The only one who might walk below and return, unchanged. That's impossible. No Raven survives the descent. The sky leaves them. Exactly. He stood. Distant thunder rolled beneath their feet. Come, Bonekeeper, he said. The winds have begun to lie. That night, Ilyra returned to the archive. Alone. She could not sleep. The memory spiral still hummed inside her mind, twining around her thoughts like ghost silk. Keorava was still drifting, majestic, calm, radiant, but now she noticed the patterns unraveling, slight dips in the skytrack, flickers in the windflow lanterns, the faint absence of birdsong. The city was forgetting its shape. And then the storm came. It arrived not from the horizon, but from above. A dark star, a spinning wound in the air, ripped downward through cloud and mist, trailing ribbons of silence. The very sky screamed as it passed, and Keorava's bones groaned. Lights burst. Wings cracked. The city reeled like a struck bell. Ilyra was thrown across the chamber. Spirals toppled. Memories shattered. 1,000 winds screamed from 1,000 bones, all speaking at once, frantic and wild. One phrase echoed above the others. She is waking. Then silence. And in the center of the spiral chamber, where no one had stood in centuries, a girl knelt. Hair like dusk, skin etched with dream glyphs. A stranger. A reflection. She looked at Ilyra. And Ilyra knew. This was the wingless air. Part 2. The sky that remembers itself. The girl did not speak. She simply rose, slow as moonlight, her body casting no shadow. Not because of the stormlight, but because Ilyra realized the wind itself refused to touch her. The archivist had seen many things, bone-sung memories, grief-locked spirals, and voices buried in ancient air. But never this. Never someone who wasn't part of the wind at all. Selen Var arrived moments later, storm-wrapped and pale, breathless from flight through torn sky bridges. He looked once at the girl and fell to his knees. You should not exist, he whispered. The girl blinked, head tilted. And then she spoke. I don't. Not yet. Her name, or the echo of what might become her name, was Kilena. She remembered little, and what she did remember made no sense to those around her. She had fallen from a sky above this sky, from a city that no longer was, in a time that hadn't happened yet. She remembered Ilyra's voice, not now, but later, as if she were recalling memories not yet made. Selen called it wind looping, the rare and dangerous unmooring of memory from sequence. Most died from it. Others became wind-mad, unanchored souls who could no longer distinguish dream from moment. But Kilena was different. She was anchored, just not here. Not yet. The storm had passed. But Keorava had changed. The great Leviathan spine that housed the central archive now sagged. Its root lattices had begun to fray. Windbinders worked feverishly to mend the flowlines, but their prayers met only flickering breezes. The sky beneath the city, once an endless expanse of luminous mist, now revealed something far more troubling. A spiral of dark, silent cloud. Shaped like an eye. Thirellen called it the memory wound. And it was growing. Ilyra brought Kylena to the outer sanctum, where only high windbinders and sovereigns were permitted. The air there was dense with thought, every current curated, each breeze held in ritual containment. Songs of old decisions hung in the walls, preserved like glass butterflies. The circle of feathers convened. 12 robed figures, each adorned with wings made not of feathers, but of woven wind ribbons, threads of harvested stormlight bound into sacred form. They did not bow, did not welcome her. One spoke, a woman with eyes like black sand. "Why have you brought an exile thought into the sanctum?" Thirellen answered. "Because she carries the song that hasn't yet been sung." Another scoffed. "Prophecy." "No," Ilyra said softly. "Memory. But not ours." The circle debated, their voices rising like clashing winds, until Kylena, still barefoot, still silent, walked to the center. She placed her palm on the spiral map of Ilyra, and the wind stilled. The air remembered. In that moment, everyone saw it. A flickering vision. Ilyra split and sinking. Sky wings ablaze. Windbinders screaming as the air turned against them. And a girl, this girl, standing on the final rib as it cracked, her arms raised not in defense, but in release. Then nothing. And the wind returned. "She ends us," whispered one of the elders. "No," Thirellen murmured. "She ends what we were. So we may become something else. Dangerous," the circle hissed. "Necessary," Ilyra said. And thus the vote was cast. Kylena would be tested. There is a trial in Ilyra not spoken of in winds or bone. It is held only for those whose souls are unanchored, whose purpose might unmake what is and birth what could be. They call it the plunge of skyroots. It is not a test of strength, nor knowledge, nor even will. It is a descent, willing, into the memory flows beneath the bones of the city, into the dreaming marrow of the Leviathan itself. It is there that true ravens find the wind of their soul, or are lost in the breath between lives. They took Kylena to the oldest rib. Bone spiral 0. Unmarked. Unsung. Unnamed. It had no carvings. No glyphs. Not because it lacked history, but because it was too old for memory. The wind there had turned inward, coiling on itself like a sleeping serpent. Kylena entered barefoot. Alone. Ilyra waited outside. So did Thirellen, pacing like a dream caught in a loop. Minutes passed. Then hours. Then a full sky cycle. No wind stirred. And then she returned. Kylena's eyes were glowing. Not with magic. With wind light. The rare, blue-silver gleam that only manifests in souls chosen by the Leviathan's breath. Her hair floated behind her like smoke in water. She looked at Ilyra and said only, "The sky remembers me. And now I remember it." Thirellen fell to his knees once more. The circle had no choice. She was declared heir of wind and silence. But not everyone rejoiced. For high above, unseen by all save one, a wingless figure watched from the breach in the sky. Cloaked in shadows, breath held like a secret, it turned and whispered a name into the wind. Isrinka. And the wind shuddered. Part 3. The city that forgot itself. There is a rhythm in all living things. A cadence of soul, of memory, of breath. Ilyra once danced to that rhythm, a city in perfect harmony with the sky's dreaming mind. Its winds sang of unity, of pride, of a time when every child was born knowing their place among the bones of Leviathan. But now the city drifted off tempo. Skybridges cracked without warning. memory spirals wept storms of grief. The clouds beneath Kailrava had grown still and heavy, no longer alive with whispering gusts. And worst of all, the people no longer heard the wind. They spoke in stiff tongues. They forgot their own names. The city was forgetting itself. Kilena walked the hollow-boned streets barefoot. Windlight still pulsed in her eyes, but it no longer flickered with uncertainty. It glowed now, constant, calm, as if a memory long buried had awakened and settled inside her heart. Ilyra followed her, recording in inkless scrolls. In Kailrava, words written in ink faded too easily. But memories etched by intent, by thought alone, endured. And Ilyra's thoughts were now full of Kilena. She walked like someone who remembered a city long dead. She whispered to the bones, and they hummed in answer. She touched a broken windglyph carved into a sky beam and said, "This was a prayer for unborn names." And suddenly, the wind sighed, softly, with the voice of children long returned to stardust. Selenvar said nothing. He watched. And feared. In the dreaming sanctum of the High Archive, the circle of feathers met again. Kilena was changing Kailrava. Where her footsteps landed, wind began to flow again. Songs returned to the air. A child who had forgotten their own mother's face looked at Kilena once and wept, with recognition. But with memory came more than comfort. Old griefs. Buried truths. Silenced betrayals. One of the circle elders, Vane Etris, wing-bearer of the southern spine, spoke plainly. "We sealed the spiral of Kael'Torin for a reason. We locked the Leviathan's heart so the screams would fade. And now this air has unbound it all." Selen rose. "She is not unbinding. She is healing. We are the ones who forgot how to grieve. You call this healing?" Etris gestured to the storm walls surrounding the outer aisles. "Half the memory flows have turned against us. Old winds are stirring, winds that remember war." The circle fractured. Some called for reverence. Others for exile. Ilyra watched as those once united by sky drifted into bitter orbit. And above it all, Kilena stood silent. Until one night she left. She took no lantern. No sky cloak. No wing-binding charms. She simply walked to the edge of the Leviathan's brow, where the city met the open sky, and stepped off. Ilyra screamed. Selen reached too late. Kilena fell. And vanished. 3 days passed. No wind blew. The city hung in air like a breath held too long. The circle prepared mourning rites. Ilyra refused. She believed. And on the dawn of the 4th day, the winds returned, not gentle, but roaring, like 1,000 forgotten songs. Kilena rose from below. But she was no longer alone. Behind her floated a second city. Ruined. Broken. Shattered into 1,000 drifting fragments. Its spires were half melted. Its sky bridges twisted. Its bones cracked. But it was real. Kilena had remembered it into being. Ravakail, the first city, the original breath of windkind. A city that had fallen in the first great sundering, so long ago even the Leviathans had forgotten it. A city born before memory, buried under the shame of its failure. Kilena had walked through the marrow of the sky and returned with its ghost. Ravakail was not inhabited. But it was not dead. Within its ruins stirred memory forms, echoes of souls long unanchored. The dream shapes of those who had fallen in the sundering, their thoughts still etched into the air like frost on glass. And in its highest spire waited Isran-Ka, the wingless prophet. Once a sovereign of wind, exiled for speaking truths too heavy for sky-born ears. a being who had shed flight to walk among forgotten winds. He waited for Kilena, and welcomed her as kin. "Child of broken breath," he said, voice soft as cloudfall. "You've done what none dared. You remembered what we were." Kilena nodded. "And I will show them." She returned to Kael'Rava with Ravakael at her heels. 2 cities now drifted through Arithrea's skies, one living, one ghosted. One proud, one ashamed. But both connected. She stood before the circle once more. And with her came choice. Kael'Rava is forgetting because it chose to forget. It cast out pain, buried shame, erased the wingless, banished the broken, and in doing so lost its own breath. But it does not have to stay that way. We can remember. We can rejoin what we severed. We can be whole. Not all agreed. Some fled. Others turned to silence. But the wind? The wind sang. And as the song rose, Ilyra realized it wasn't a song of the past. It was a new wind. One that whispered, "Begin again." Part 4. The Wingless and the Skyborn. The cities hung in tandem. Kael'Rava, whole but wounded, shimmering with fractured pride, and Ravakael, its broken echo, drifting like a memory too potent to forget. Between them, Kilena. The air itself had changed. Wind no longer obeyed its familiar pathways. It curved around Kilena as though she were the anchor of a new current, and some called her wind-born. Others said unbound. But in whispers, in the corners of drifting markets and prayer bridges, they used a different name. Skybreaker. The reunification of Ravakael brought more than memory. It brought the lost. They came slowly at first, figures of air and thought, half-formed from the dreaming fragments of the sunken city. Their limbs flickered. Their eyes shimmered. They were not ghosts, but memory forms, souls preserved in wind, etched so deeply into Ravakael's sky bones that they had become almost real. They remembered only what had hurt them. And that, Ilyra soon learned, made them dangerous. The first attack was on a bridge. A child named Aru, barely 10 cycles, was playing near the tether spines that linked Kael'Rava to the ghost city when a figure emerged from mist. It wore the form of a woman with antlered braids and hollow eyes, its fingers trailing blue wind fire. It spoke only one word before striking. "Traitor." The boy survived. The bridge did not. The circle of feathers demanded Kilena explain. "They aren't attackers," she said calmly. "They are wounds that were never allowed to heal." Vain Etrus's voice was sharp as storm glass. "They are blades walking our sky. And you've brought them here." Selenvar stepped forward. "Then perhaps the wound is not theirs alone." Ilyra began to see the fracture widening. Not between the cities, but within Kael'Rava itself. There were those who welcomed the old city's return, artists, windbinders, truth-seers. They saw Ravakael as a missing breath finally inhaled again. They chanted Kilena's name like a prayer, called her the Windroot, and carved her spirals into the archive walls. But others remembered differently. They spoke of Ravakael as a failure, a city whose ambition had cursed the sky. They feared that the memory forms were just the beginning. That Kilena's wind was not a healing breeze, but a rising storm. "Wind forgets," said one elder. "We do not bind it with guilt." "No," Ilyra replied softly. "But we must listen to it." And all the while, the sky wound grew. Not in size, but in presence. Selen called it a confluence breach, a thinning of the boundaries between wind and memory, dream and world, where the currents of time curled inward and began to feed on one another. It hovered above the city like a great black spiral, silent, patient. Waiting. Kilena stood on the high bones again, where wind met stars. Ilyra joined her in the dusk light, sky pulsing violet above and silver beneath. Ravakale shimmered in the distance, tethered now by memory chains that pulsed with wind light. They fear you, Ilyra said gently. Kilena didn't look away. Because I remember too much. Then teach them to remember with you. The wind-born girl turned, her face lit by stars that did not exist yesterday. How? Story, Ilyra whispered. Let them hear the truth. All of it. And so they prepared the rite of returning. A ritual not performed in 10 generations. Once, it was how new windbinders were named, by listening to the bones of the sky and speaking aloud what they heard. Now, it would serve a different purpose. A city-wide remembrance. Kilena would open a spiral of Ravakale's heart and let the wind flow carry its memory through every corner of Kaorava. But such a wind could not be controlled. Once loosed, it would speak everything, every betrayal, every sorrow, every secret sealed away when Ravakale fell. The city had to choose, truth or silence. The circle split. 3 elders resigned in protest. 2 prepared for exile. But the vote passed, and the spiral opened. The wind that poured forth was not gentle. It screamed. It sang. It wept. The sky filled with voices, some pleading, some accusing, others simply mourning. The people of Kaorava dropped to their knees in open plazas and halbone domes, their souls flooded with memories not their own. One woman remembered her sister's final scream during the sundering. A windsmith heard his grandfather's apology, buried in shame. A child cried for a home they had never known but now missed deeply. And above it all, the memory-formed voices whispered, "We were never lost. You chose not to look." When the wind faded, Kaorava was silent. Not broken, but hollowed out, like a breath finally exhaled. That night, Thirellen found Kilena alone in the dream chamber of the Leviathan's eye. "You did it," he said. She shook her head. "I opened the wound, but we haven't healed." Thirellen nodded. "That's the work of generations." She looked up. "Then we start now." He stepped forward. "There's something you must see. It's not from Kaorava. Or Ravakale." She frowned. "Where, then?" "Beneath." And so they turned their eyes downward, toward the unwinded lands, where air has no memory, where no wind ever flows, where a city once fell, so far from the sky that even the Leviathans wept, and where something ancient has begun to stir. Something that remembers neither sky-born nor wingless, but only silence. Part 5. The Breathless Below. There is a place beneath the sky where breath does not reach. No wind. No song. No memory. The Ravens call it Arithrea, the hollow depth, the silence beneath the roots. But the old names have faded. Now, it is only known as the unwinded lands. Kilena had never felt cold like this. Not frost or chill, but a stillness so complete it stole sensation. Her skin prickled. Her thoughts slowed. It was as if every breeze she had ever known had been tied to a thread, and those threads had now all been cut. They rode a descent spindle, an ancient Raven sky coil, lower than any Raven had dared in generations. Selenvar was pale, his dream cloak billowing unnaturally. Even Ilyra, usually steady as bone, gripped the rail as if afraid the air would slip away. Because here it might. No one truly knew what lay beneath the clouds. Ravakale's fall had left no record, only memory forms and the haunted song lines carried by wind. And none had survived the return climb. None, until Kilena. But even she had not touched the lowest tier. Not Ermira. Now, the silver cloud layers thinned and revealed it. A dark, silent terrain stretched below, a labyrinth of black glass ridges and flat, motionless lakes. Vast spires jutted like broken quills from the earth, and above it all hung an unnatural void, a dome of sky that did not shimmer, did not reflect, did not move. No birds. No drift beasts. No echo. Only stillness. And in the center stood a city. It was not made of bone, nor wind thread, nor the sky glass common to Ravan architecture. It was carved from obsidian silence. Spiral towers shaped like fossilized breath. Bridges that looped inward but led nowhere. Statues of beings with no faces, only mirrored hollows where eyes should be. Thirellen whispered its name, like something pulled from a half-dream. Thirellen. Kilena narrowed her eyes. What is it? Thirellen's voice shook. The first city. Older than the wind. Older than even Leviathan's song. It was not built by Ravens. Ilyra shuddered. Then who? Those who came before memory. They walked the still corridors. Sound behaved strangely here. Footsteps echoed but did not fade. Breaths came out hollow. Even thought felt muffled, as though wrapped in cloth. But the city was not dead. Not entirely. Strange growths pulsed in the walls, like veins beneath black crystal. Symbols flickered and vanished when looked at directly. And from the depths of one sunken courtyard came a hum, a frequency beyond hearing, but felt behind the teeth. It was dreaming. They found the first signs of life, or what once had been, in a great dome beneath the central spire. Dozens of stone chairs, perfectly arranged in spirals. On each sat a figure cloaked in robes of ash. Frozen. Not decayed. Ilyra leaned close. Their faces were blank. Not burned away, unformed. Like the idea of a person that had never quite become real. And above them all, suspended in a column of unmoving light, floated a stone heart the size of a leviathan's skull. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically. Kilena stepped forward. The pulsing stopped. The room breathed in. You have brought wind where wind was banished. Kilena froze. The voice did not come from a mouth. It came from within the city, as though the stone itself remembered speech. Thirellen whispered, Do not answer it. Kilena stepped closer. I came to listen, she said. A long silence. Then you will remember what we forgot. The heart cracked, and the city woke. Wind exploded outward, not the kind Kilena knew. Not memory. Not thought. But something older. Heavier. The statues moved. Stone limbs uncoiled from spiral thrones. No eyes. No mouths. Just gleaming hollows. Ilyra stumbled back. What are they? Thirellen's face was white. Not memory forms. Not alive. They are remnants. Dream shells left behind when the sky was still shaping itself. Kilena did not move. The heart above her shattered into 6 pieces, and in its place remained only a shadow. Not cast, but felt. You have broken the seal, it whispered. Now the wind shall return to us. And so shall we. The sky above Ermira rippled. Kailrava, drifting high above, tilted. Its winds began to reverse. In the archive, the spirals spun without wind. In Rava Kail, the memory forms screamed as one and vanished into mist, and high above, tether lines began to fray. Kilena looked upward, and saw Kailrava falling. "It's beginning," Thirellen whispered. "What is?" Ilyra asked, breathless. Kilena's voice was steady. "The rejoining. Part 6. The storm that was never born." At first, the fall was silent. No sirens. No cries. No shattering of glass. Only a subtle tilting of the wind lines. A momentary hesitation in the rhythm of the city's breath. Kailrava had always floated in harmony with the skies, its wings aligned to the great leviathan bones that held it aloft. Each breath of wind passed through the spiral core, and from there, into the sky-binding loops that kept the city steady. But now, the leviathan bones no longer sang. They screamed. Ilyra gripped the edge of the descent spindle, knuckles white, eyes locked on the shape above, Kailrava listing sideways, its great wings fluttering erratically like a wounded bird. "She's losing lift," Thirellen said grimly. They had emerged from Thirellen less than an hour ago. The breach into the unwinded lands had shifted something ancient. Something fundamental. Even now, the sky around them stuttered, pulsing between deep blue and that same black-silver shimmer that marked memory convergence. "I thought the spiral core was stable," Ilyra whispered. "It was," Thirellen said, "until the wind remembered what it had forgotten." Kilena stood alone on the upper deck of the sky coil, watching her city flail above like a memory torn too soon from dreaming. But her face held no fear. Only stillness. "I saw this," she whispered, "when I first fell. I saw Kailrava cracking." Ilyra approached. "How do we stop it?" "We don't." "Then what do we do?" Kilena's eyes met hers. "We become what comes next." The city had not yet fallen, but it was unraveling. Across its wings, windbinders scrambled to realign the leviathan vertebrae, to coax wind currents back into harmony. But their songs failed. The wind would no longer listen. Below, tether lines snapped. Ravakail drifted outward, its ghost forms flickering like embers in windless air. Its spirals began to spin again, not in memory, but in warning. Thirellen raised his hands to the sky, invoking the dream coil, a rare binding used only during vision storms. He spoke the ancient word, Levirin. The wind paused. And then, far above, the sky opened. It did not break. It peeled. A great seam appeared across the horizon, a line of absence, of unmade wind, stretching from one side of the heavens to the other. From it light poured down. Not golden. Not silver. White. Pure, sharp, searing. The light of a storm that had never been allowed to form. A wind denied birth. A tempest unborn, now returned for vengeance. Thirellen fell to one knee. "It's the null storm," he said. Kilena nodded. "I felt it breathing in Thirellen. They sealed it away when they locked the wind beneath memory. It was never supposed to exist. But now, it remembers." The light touched the spirals of Kailrava, and for a moment, everything went still. Then, from the heart of the spiral core, a roar echoed. Not of a beast, not of a city, but of air itself, torn open by what should not be. Kailrava's central rib cracked. The sound was like the death of a song. Kilena turned to Ilyra. "I need you to do something," she said. "Anything. When the leviathan bones fracture, the memory flows will try to escape. You must catch them. With your thoughts. With your breath. With yourself." Ilyra's eyes widened. "That could destroy me." No, Kilena said. It will transform you. The wind must have a new anchor. And you? I'll call the storm. I was born from it. It will listen to me. Thirellen grabbed her arm. You don't understand. The null storm isn't just wind. It's erasure. It will strip your soul of memory, of self, of. Kilena smiled, soft and terrible. I have remembered so much. I am ready to forget. The storm descended. It came not as rain, nor lightning, but as silence, pressing against thought, folding over identity. People dropped to the ground, clutching their heads. Windbinders forgot their own names mid-chant. Memory forms scattered into stardust. And above it all, Kilena stood at the edge of the Leviathan's brow, arms open. Her voice rose, not loud, but true. I am not wind. I am not memory. I am the space between. And I name you, storm that was never born. You are seen. You are sung. You are real. Now be still. The light flared. And then, it listened. The null storm did not vanish. It folded, collapsed inward, spiraling like a song reversed. And in its place hovered something else. A new Leviathan rib. Forged not from the past, but from what had never been. Ilyra righted itself. Its winds returned. And every soul aboard felt it. A new breath. A new sky. Kilena collapsed. Not dead. Not asleep. But empty. Her memories had scattered into the new spiral, seeding it with possibility. And Ilyra, kneeling beside her, felt the winds gather around her shoulders. She looked up. And the sky bowed. Part 7. The bone that remembers the future. The skies were quiet. For the first time in recorded wind flow, no spirals sang. Ilyra drifted unshaken, its wings steady, the fracture in its Leviathan ribs sealed, not by repair, but by renewal. A new spiral had emerged from the eye of the null storm, and within it, no memory flowed. Only possibility. The wind had never known that before. Ilyra stood before the new spiral. It was unlike the others. Not bone white, but pale blue. Its surface shimmered like translucent glass, and when one stared too long into it, shapes flickered, moments that had not happened yet. A child with wings of starlight. Kilena walking through a city made of feathers. Thirellen dissolving into song. Fire raining from an unseen sky. The future was dreaming, and this spiral was listening. Thirellen, his eyes dull with exhaustion, spoke softly in the wind reader sanctum. She gave herself to the song that hadn't yet been sung. Ilyra nodded, still trembling. I hear pieces of her in the breeze. When I sleep, I dream in her cadence. She's not gone, Thirellen said. She's become the wind she awakened. The circle of feathers, reduced now to 6 members, stood divided. Some called for sealing the new spiral. Others wanted it shattered. But Ilyra, newly anointed as Moonscribes sovereign, held her ground. She didn't just stop the storm. She gave us a way forward. A bone that doesn't anchor us to the past, but to what we might become. That night, the wind carried something new. Not a song. Not a scream. A question. And the spiral answered. Ilyra descended into the bone's hollow chamber alone, scrolls wrapped in thought silk at her side. She placed her palm on the blue spiral, and the wind paused. You are not Kilena, it whispered. No, Ilyra said. But I carry her memory. She carries yours. Ilyra blinked. She's still inside? Not as she was. But yes. Then let me speak with her. A long silence. Then, wind poured upward. Not wild, not fierce, but familiar. And Ilyra saw her. Not Kilena's body. Her shape. Her pattern. Her rhythm. She drifted above the spiral like starlight drawn into form. Her voice was barely audible. I can't return. Not fully. But I can help you see. What do I need to see? Ilyra asked. The others. Other cities? Other bones. The light pulsed. Kailrava was never alone. There are others, sleeping cities, broken winds, waiting for their name to be remembered. If we do not reach them, they will fall into silence forever. Where? Beneath the mirror tides. Beyond the Cinderglass peaks. In the hollow roots of Arkenville. And in the last breath of the moon's shadow. Why me? Ilyra asked. Kilena's light flickered gently. Because you're no longer just a listener. You are the one who remembers forward. In the weeks that followed, Kailrava transformed. Windbinders trained anew, not to preserve, but to imagine. Spiral readers were taught to dream with open minds. Songs were written for the future, not just the past. And Ilyra prepared a vessel. Not a skycoil. Not a windcraft. But a leviathan seed, a fragment of bone grown from the blue spiral, wrapped in unformed memory. It would grow as she traveled. And it would carry her across the world. Thirellen stood at the edge of the launch ledge, watching her pack her memory scrolls. You'll find places we've forgotten. I'll write them down. You'll find winds that don't speak our tongue. I'll listen anyway. Thirellen placed a hand on her shoulder. When you find the last bone, the one that remembers the first silence, call for me. I will. And so she departed. Ilyra, Moonscribes sovereign of Kailrava, bearer of the future bone, with Kilena's rhythm in her breath, and the wind at her back. Part 8. The Cartographer of Unwritten Skies. There was a time when maps of the sky were carved in bone. Not ink. Not stone. But in the marrow of leviathans and the breath of windbinders who listened so deeply they could trace the shape of a city's soul. Ilyra was one such cartographer now. She flew not to document what was, but to become the witness of what might yet be. Her leviathan seed pulsed beneath her feet, unfurling spirals of new bone with each passing league. The winds around her whispered not names, but questions. As if the world were testing her, stretching forward like a child waking from a long dream. She called her vessel Evra's memory. It grew slowly, deliberately. It did not move through the sky, but with it, like a thought rising from the edge of consciousness. And beneath its shadow, new stories stirred. The first land she reached was Immerse, a mirrored archipelago half drowned in tide dreams. Its cities lay beneath silver seas where the stars floated in the water like luminous jellyfish. The people there spoke in colors. Their truths were woven from coral and light. Ilyra listened. She traced their spirals, not in sound, but reflection. And when she left, the sea sang her name. Next came the Cinderglass peaks, mountains of obsidian laced with veins of flame crystal. The air burned with silent lightning, and the tribes who lived there rode firestorms across sky paths visible only to those who had once died. They called themselves the Ashborn. When Ilyra arrived, their seer laughed. Another Raven ghost, come to remember what your sky forgot? She stayed a month, learned to listen through flame, and left carrying a bone carved from volcanic breath. In each place she visited, her seed grew larger, wider, more complex. Each culture gifted her something: songs, rituals, fragments of memory untouched by Ilyra's winds. And in turn, she left behind spirals. Blue glass bones that hummed softly at night. Bones that remembered forward. But it was not all peace. In the hollow roots of Arkenville, she found silence so deep even the trees had forgotten how to grow. An ancient forest, petrified mid-prayer. The soil wept dust. The rivers ran in reverse. And something watched her. Not with eyes, but with hunger. "Give us your future," it whispered. "We will feed on what you might become." She did not speak. Instead, she planted a spiral. Not of memory, not of wind, but of story. And the thing retreated. For now. In the second year of her journey, Evra's memory began to hum. A new sound. Familiar. Kilena's rhythm. The spiral within her ship, the one made from the Nullstorm's heart, began to glow. It sang only one phrase. "The sky is ready." Ilyra turned the ship toward the horizon. There, on the farthest rim of Arithrea's map, beyond known currents, past storm-crowded vaults, rose something immense. Not a city. Not a storm. A presence. A wind so vast it had forgotten how to speak. Selenvar met her there. She had not called him. But he came, drawn by the pull of the spiral's breath. "I dreamed of this place," he said. "So did I," Ilyra whispered. "Before I was born." They stood together at the edge, windless, nameless, and planted the final spiral. A new Leviathan bone, etched not with the past, but with every hope, every choice, every story that had not yet been lived. And from it, wind, soft, warm, young, it flowed outward, curling across Arithrea like a newborn's breath. In the distance, the skies of Ilyra shimmered. Ravakale pulsed. And high above, Kilena's rhythm lingered. Not gone, not ghost, but seed. The first wind of the new age rose. Not remembered, not bound, only becoming. And Ilyra, cartographer of unwritten skies, began to draw. Let us descend now into the obsidian veins of the world, where light is carved from pain, and fire does not burn, but remembers. Welcome to Cinderglass. The Ashless Flame. Part 1. The Soul That Burned in Silence. Arithrea turns in silence. Its winds rise and fall. Its tides dream. Its stars forget and remember in rhythm. But far to the north, past the veils of ash and lightning, beyond the scorched plains of Varnrith and the fireless dunes of Drelhar, stands a range not marked on any living map. It is not hidden. It is simply too bright to look upon. They call it Cinderglass, a crown of volcanic peaks veined with radiant obsidian and eternal lightning, where fire does not burn, and ash has no scent. Here, in the hollows of melted stone and hollow flame, dwell the Ashborn. They do not sleep. They do not die. They rekindle. The Ashborn believe every soul is made of 3 flames. The first flame remembers what you have lost. The second flame remembers what you have done. The third flame remembers what you were meant to become. At the end of each life, these flames collapse into Cinderglass, a translucent shard formed not from death, but from lived pain. This shard is cradled by the firekeepers, and after 7 cycles of nightless dreaming, the soul is placed in a new body. They are reborn. But they do not forget. Every Ashborn lives many lives. And some remember too much. Her name was Severin K. It was her 6th rekindling. She had once been a storm hunter, chasing fire spirits through the lightning canyons of ardent Vrax. In another life, she had been a librarian, cataloging the heat signatures of extinct volcano gods. And long ago, so long she rarely spoke of it, she had been a child who watched a mountain scream and fall, burying her first mother in rivers of molten memory. Severin did not fear flame, but she feared the silence of flame. And lately, the fire had gone quiet. In the deepest sanctum of the flame vault, where walls shimmered with the glow of 1,000 lives, the third flame of Severin's soul had begun to dim. It should have burned brighter with each rekindling. But now it flickered, dull and strange. "Something in me is unburned," she whispered to the high Emberite. Elder Marin, whose eyes were like cooled coals, studied her in silence. "You are incomplete," he said. "Impossible," Severin replied. "The rites were done. The Cinderglass sealed." Marin gestured toward her shard, now pulsing faintly on the altar. "Look closely. Tell me what is missing." She stared. Within the crystal, 2 flames coiled, familiar, sharp. But the third was not there. Only a shadow. Not absence. Not failure. But interruption. "You were not meant to rekindle this time," Marin said at last. Severin turned sharply. "You think I returned too early?" He shook his head. "I think something else returned with you." That night she stood on the spine of Cinderglass, a jagged obsidian cliff where firelight drifted like snow, and the sky shimmered with heat-haze stars. She could feel it inside her. A silence where a flame should be. A memory that had never burned. In Ashborn belief, only flame can tell truth. And when flame refuses to speak, it means one thing. A life has been stolen. Not forgotten. Not lost. But taken. Severin sought the votary of hollow flame, a forbidden order of flame glass speakers who study what is not remembered. They lived far below the city craters, beneath the dead calderas, in caverns carved from silent eruptions. No Ashborn descended there without permission. Severin did not ask. The journey was long and lightless. She carried no torch. Only a shard of her own Cinderglass. It pulsed not with heat, but with a faint hum, as if whispering through stone. At last, she reached a chamber of mirrored fire. It held no color. No heat. Only a pool of molten dark that shimmered with unlit thought. And there stood a figure cloaked in smoke. No eyes. No mouth. Just hands made of cracked glass. "Why have you come?" Severin stepped forward. "My third flame is gone." The figure tilted its head. "Not gone. Unburned." "Then help me remember." A long silence. Then, "To remember what has not burned, you must walk where no flame dares follow. You must enter the vault of still fire." Severin's voice shook. "But that place is forbidden, yes. Destroys all memory, yes. Contains the names of those who were erased, yes. And you, Severin K., are already among them. To enter the vault of still fire is to stand within the eye of silence. To gaze upon a flame that devours not light, but meaning. If she entered, Severin might return. But she would not return the same. She did not hesitate. Part 2. The flame that cannot speak. The descent began in darkness. Not the kind born of shadow or night, but of something older, something that predated flame. This was stillness given form, carved through eons of cooled magma and petrified heat. Even the stone here had forgotten how to remember fire. Severin K's boots struck the obsidian floor with no echo. Each step down the spiral path took her closer to the vault of still fire, a place outlawed by the Emberites, denounced in the temples, and erased from public record. And yet, she had always known it was real. For years, a silence had pulsed behind her ribs like a memory she'd been born with but never lived. Now she knew why. There was a flame inside her that had never been allowed to burn. A life stolen, unkind lead. And the vault held its name. Her only companion was her Cinderglass shard, a sliver of soul light forged during her 5th death and 6th rebirth. Normally it would glow softly, whispering traces of who she had once been. But now, its flame had receded, leaving only faint heat and a dim hum. As she walked, glyphs began to appear on the tunnel walls, etched into the rock not with tools, but with absence. Like someone had burned out the meaning itself. Each glyph twisted the eye, familiar yet unreadable. Words left unfinished. She was nearing the center. The vault was not a room. It was a hollow. A wound in the world. A spherical chamber carved from pure vitrified stone, its walls lined with ancient fireglass that held no color, no reflection, only stillness. In the center floated a single flame, impossibly motionless, unnaturally silent. Severin knelt before it. The still fire. The only fire in existence that burned without heat, without sound, without light. To touch it was to lose something. Not limb, not life, but memory. She unclasped the shard from around her neck and held it forward. The Cinderglass pulsed, flickered, then cracked. Not broken, but opened. From within poured not fire, but a windless breath, like ash made into thought. Her skin prickled. Her bones buzzed. A voice, not spoken, but embedded, whispered across her skin. You are not whole. One flame remains unburned. To kindle it, you must offer what you do not know you carry. Severin frowned. I have nothing left. You have silence. And with that, the still fire flared. For the first time in recorded Arithrean history. It moved. She screamed. Not aloud. Her soul screamed. She fell inward, into the fire's orbit. Not burning. Not melting, but unraveling. Images flooded her. Not from her current life. Not from the ones before. But from something else. A 9th flame. A hidden spiral. Memories she had never lived surged through her mind. A child standing atop the caldera rim, raising her hand as the mountain collapsed, not running from it, but commanding it. A woman dressed in void-colored flame glass, speaking to a crowd of masked ashborn beneath a blood-red moon. Her voice shook the stone. A ritual, interrupted. Flames snuffed out mid-right. A cry. A blade. Then nothing. The images blurred. Reality twisted. And then she was falling. Not through space, but through lives. She woke in another time. Another self. Severin's hands were smaller now. Her voice, when she gasped, was unfamiliar. She stood barefoot in a chamber made of pure fireglass, shaped like a blooming flower. Her skin shimmered with molten tattoos, marks she didn't remember earning. Before her stood a mirror. It held no reflection, only absence. And behind her, a figure approached. Ashborn. Hooded. Unreadable. Severin K., it said. You should not exist. You were unwritten. She turned. Who did this to me? The figure raised a hand. And from the air, it conjured a name, a word so heavy it landed in her chest like molten stone. Thirellen. The Flame Council's lost sovereign. A name stricken from every archive. a being thought only to exist in myth. She feared what you would become, so she erased the flame before it could be born. Your third flame was never given a name. It was buried. The memory ended with fire. Not heat, but sound. A scream that reversed time. A face behind a mask. And silence. Always silence. Severin woke on the floor of the vault, her body trembling. She reached for her shard. It had changed. The third flame had returned. But it was not gentle. It blazed. A spiral of blue and gold flickered within, alive, defiant, ancient. And around it, etched in shimmering lines, was a glyph she had never seen before. But she understood its meaning. It was her name, the one that had been stolen. Now remembered. Now burned. When she emerged from the vault, the sky above Cinderglass had darkened. Not from clouds. From flame-glass dust, falling gently from the mountaintops like glowing snow. A sign of awakening. In the ember temples, the bells of rekindling tolled without being rung. All across the high calderas, ash-born souls paused. Felt something shift. A silence broken. A flame spoken. Elder Marin was waiting at the edge of the caldera. When Severin approached, he knelt. "You are no longer Severin K. I am," she said, voice raw. "And I am also what I was before." He looked up, fire dancing in his eyes. "Then it's true." "What?" "The lost flame walks again." In the days that followed, Cinderglass trembled. The mountain heart, long dormant, stirred. The deep caverns cracked. The hollow flame orders whispered of prophecy, that when the unburned rose, the sky itself would ignite, not in fire, but in memory. And from the ashes of that flame, something older than the ashborn would rise. Something that had once ruled not just mountain, but moon. Severin was reborn. Not through death, but through reclamation. She was no longer just a bearer of past lives. She was a bearer of the interrupted. And across the black glass cliffs of Cinderglass, a name once forbidden began to rise like morning heat. Thirellen, the erased sovereign. The flame that silenced the unborn. Severin's next life would not be a memory. It would be a reckoning. Part 3. The sovereign without a name. It is said that the mountain knows its own sorrow. That every crack in the glass-boned cliffs, every vein of firelight pulsing through the stone, is a memory the mountain could not forget. In Cinderglass, memory is flame. And flame, once born, cannot be buried. But names can be. And the name Thirellen had been buried so deep, not even the embers dared whisper it, until now. The people of the crater cities were cautious. At first, they came in silence. Watchers in the mist. Firewalkers whose tattoos flickered strangely when Severin passed. Hollow flame monks with mirrored eyes who offered no greeting, only bowed heads. Then came the questions. They did not ask who she was. They asked what she remembered. In the temple of black light, where flames danced without shadows and memory glass rang like bells, Severin was summoned by the Council of Cinders. 9 elders, each with more lives than names, sat encircled in thrones carved from hardened whispers, stone once softened by sorrow, then cooled by regret. Elder Marin stood behind her. She felt no fear, only clarity. Elder Surai, whose body was partially turned to obsidian from too many failed rebirths, leaned forward. "You are the 6th flame of Severin K," she rasped. "Do you acknowledge the 5 before you?" "I do," Severin said. "And the one that was taken." Gasps murmured through the chamber. Elder Valai, blind but far-seeing, whispered, Then you name the nameless? I name her, Severin said. She who was never given the right to burn. The child of fire silenced before her first breath. I name her. She paused, then spoke. Thirellen. The word struck the room like a hammer. The great braziers dimmed. A thin line of glass cracked beneath the elder's feet. And Elder Maran, eyes wide with grief and awe, whispered, "So it begins again." They tried to warn her that remembering Thirellen was dangerous, not because of what the name meant, but because of what it might become. Thirellen, they told her, was the last sovereign who sought to bind a third flame. She wanted to name every soul before it kindled. She feared chaos. She feared the wildness of rebirth. And so, she tried to steal control of the flame. And in doing so, she erased dozens of unborn lives, rekindlings that never came. Souls sealed in silence. Her own flame glass shard was shattered in the act. She was devoured by her own ritual. Or so they believed. Until Severin spoke her name. That night, Severin climbed alone to the spire of whispered flame. It was the highest point in all of Cinderglass, a jagged tower carved into a lightning-struck peak. The wind there never stopped howling. The fire never burned red, only silver. Here, Ashborn came to choose their next death. Here, they cast their flame into the air and waited for the mountain to decide whether they would return. Severin did not come to die. She came to remember, and to burn what could no longer be buried. She lit the brazier with her breath. The flame leapt high, touched the clouds, then curled inward, a spiral of memory descending like snowfall. She spoke aloud. Thirellen, you were not evil. You were afraid. You sought order where there could only be flame. You tried to bind what must remain wild. But you were also me. And I am not ashamed. The flame turned blue, then violet, then a color that had no name, and then a voice. Not in her ears, in her flame glass. You found me. You burned without me. But now you are whole. The shard pulsed. And a second self, shaped like Severin, but not, stepped from the flame. Her skin was smooth obsidian, cracked with lines of light. Her eyes were deep wells of remembering. Her voice was Severin's voice, but heavier. I am what you might have been. I am Thirellen. And I do not want to return. Severin stepped closer. Then why are you here? Because you called me. Because the mountain remembers. Because others will come. Others who were never born. The horizon flashed. Not with lightning. With fire. A series of pulses from distant calderas, deep-born ancient. Severin recognized the pattern. It was an alarm older than language, used only once before in recorded flame. The vaults have cracked. The unburned are stirring. And something else. Beneath the surface of the mountain. A presence. Massive. Breathing. Hungry. Severin turned to her second self. Is this your doing? Thirellen shook her head. No. This is what came after. The one who fed on our absence. It is rising now. The Ashborn had long feared many things. A return of the flame plagues. A collapse of the rebirth lattice. The betrayal of memory itself. But this was worse. This was the return of the ashless. Long ago, before the flame glass arches were built and before the memory rituals bound each soul's path, there were others. Not Ashborn. Not reborn. Not even remembered. They were the first attempts. Souls sparked without shape. Flames lit without form. Lives ignited without boundaries. They burned themselves out in seconds. Or centuries. Or not at all. They became hollows, echoes that never died, because they had never truly lived. And now, beneath the heart of Cinderglass, one such hollow had begun to stir. The ashless flame. It had no soul. Only hunger. And it had felt Severin's name reach through time. She returned to the temple of black light the next day, fire dancing behind her. The council of cinders waited. She bowed once, then spoke. I am Severin K. I am the sixth rekindling. I carry the shard of Thirellen. And I am not alone. The flame that cannot be named has spoken. And now, something worse has heard it. They stared. Elder Marin nodded solemnly. So we fight? No, Severin said. We bind. There was only one way to stop the ashless. To remember them. To give them shape. To offer what they were denied. And that meant opening the memory vaults. Letting all the unborn flames speak. Letting the mountain weep their stories into fire. It had never been done. The vaults were sacred. Locked by rites older than the sun's first rise. But Severin held Thirellen's shard. And the mountain would listen. She stood again at the edge of the caldera. Raised the shard. Spoke her flame aloud. And the stone cracked. From within poured voices. Not screams. Not songs. But questions. And one by one, the flames of the unborn lit the sky. And the mountain answered. Part 4. The ember that remembers itself. There is a sound that comes just before flame takes form. Not a crack. Not a roar. A gathering, a hush drawn inward, like a mountain holding breath. And on the 43rd night after the still fire was stirred, the breath of Cinderglass was no longer steady. From the 5 cardinal calderas, the molten veins of the mountain began to glow with a color unseen in living memory, deep amethyst laced with flickering silver. It was the hue of unkind lead flame, of the unborn fire, the secret glow of stories that had never been told. Severin K. stood at the center of the Ember Cross, a vast obsidian amphitheater carved from the petrified ribs of a collapsed volcano god. Around her, the flames of the vaults, once sealed for eternity, now rose high in silent spirals. And within them, voices. Not fully formed. Not yet coherent. But present. They called it the first Emberfall. It was not an event. It was an awakening. Across Cinderglass, citizens paused as windless heat drifted over the peaks, not hot, but dense, pressing against memory like a hand on the chest. Those who had lived many lives felt echoes in their bones. Those newly rekindled wept, not knowing why. And in the hollow flame orders, monks laid down their mirrored masks and began singing names they did not recognize, as if guided by the fire itself. Severin could feel them. Each voice. Each spark. They weren't haunting her, they were becoming her. The Cinderglass shard at her spine now pulsed with 3 distinct rhythms. Her own current life, steady, grounded, scarred. The buried shard of Thirellen, sharp, commanding, sorrow-laced. And now a 3rd thread. Wild. Shifting. Unstable. Not a flame that had lived before. A flame that had waited. Marin met her at the edge of the Ember Cross. His hands shook. They're not stopping. Severin didn't answer. The vaults, every one is open. The seals broke together. That isn't supposed to be possible. They weren't broken, Severin said. They opened. You mean they chose to? She nodded. They want to be remembered. But remembrance was not peace. In the city of Virkarn, high above the fire bridges, a child burst into flame during sleep. Not the ordinary spark of a soul beginning to stir, but a full manifestation of a flame born that had never been named. The child was unharmed. But their voice, when they awoke, was not their own. It spoke in tongues from a time before the rekindling rites. I am the one who wandered through memory without light. I am the song never sung, the rite never named. I have returned. The child collapsed. Slept for 3 days. Woke with golden eyes. And when asked their name said, Thirellen. It was not a possession. It was not madness. It was a ripple. Severin realized the truth slowly, then all at once. The unborn weren't just returning. They were inhabiting the present. In the Ember Temples, debate erupted. Elder Surai argued for containment. These embers are wild. They were sealed for a reason. They have not passed through the fire of forgetting. They are dangerous. They are us, Severin replied. They are the stories we feared to tell. And some stories kill, said Elder Valai, whose own brother had once failed a rekindling and returned hollow. Marin turned to Severin privately. You are the only one they listen to. What are you going to do? She looked out across the glowing mountain's cape, her shard humming softly. I'm going to name them. It began with the ember binding. Not a rite. Not a ritual. A choice. Severin entered the flame-glass sanctum alone, carrying a single sliver of Virellen's crystal and a blank soul's heart, uncarved, waiting. There, surrounded by the light of thousands of remembered lives, she sat and opened herself. Let the voices come. They flooded her. Not as pain, but as possibility. She saw a woman who had once lived only for one breath before her birth flame was extinguished by decree. She saw a child who had been prophesied to bring change, and was sealed away before their soul could rise. She saw a choir of unspoken selves, drifting for centuries in silence. Each reached for her, and she named them, one by one. Outside, the city burned. Not with destruction, with recognition. In every district, new flames ignited. Unfamiliar names began to appear in the rekindling scrolls, names no one had written, but that the mountains remembered. And from the chasms below, something vast stirred. Severin knew it was time. The ashless flame, the echo-born presence sealed beneath the central caldera, was no longer sleeping. She could feel it through her spine. Its hunger had changed. No longer simple consumption. Now it sought merging. A reformation of all unkind led flame into a singular will. Not for understanding, but for dominion. A being of raw memoryless power. If it rose fully, it would overwrite every rekindling thread, flood the mountain with nameless fire, undo centuries of work. It had no name, no self. That was its strength, and its weakness. She would go to it, alone, not to fight, to offer a name. The journey down took 2 days. No escort, no flame sigil, only her shard and her voice. She descended into Kesvor, the broken mouth, the original breach in the mountain where the first Ashborn died and the last of the hollow flame was sealed. Its corridors twisted between timelines, scarred with failed memories and sealed thoughts. As she passed, the walls whispered. Not warnings. Questions. Do you know what you are? Are you the one who stole breath from the forgotten? Are you Thirellen reborn? Or are you her regret? She did not answer. She listened, and stepped forward. The final chamber was not a forge, nor a throne, nor a vault. It was a mirror, tall as a cathedral, wide as the caldera, made of polished black fire crystal, and in its surface, no reflection, only possibility. Severin approached. The shard in her chest glowed. Her third flame blazed. And the ashless flame spoke, not in words, in absence. Her ears rang. Her breath caught. The ground trembled. But she did not fall. She pressed her palm to the mirror and whispered, I see you. You are not nothing. You were denied your name. But I give you one. You are Arithrean. The mountain shuddered. The mirror cracked. And the flame ignited. For a moment, all of Cinderglass went silent. Then, a great pulse of heat spread across the calderas. Not destructive. Cleansing. Ash lifted into the sky and formed words. Not in Ravaic. Not in ashborn glyph. But in flame. Severin collapsed, unconscious. And above her, the mirror burned. Then cooled. And became still. She awoke in the temple of black light. Marin stood beside her. You lived, he said softly. Severin smiled. No. I was named. They would later call it the second Emberfall. The day the ashless were given breath. Not all flames were kind. Not all stories ended in warmth. But now, all had the right to be spoken. Severin K., sixth rekindling, bearer of Thirellen's shard, became the first flame binder of the unborn. She did not return to her former role. She became a wanderer. She carried flame glass to the furthest calderas, to the forgotten peaks, to the caves where failed souls had been hidden. She named them all, and the mountain listened. And somewhere deep beneath, where silence still curled around old sorrow, the echo of a voice whispered, Let there be fire. We now lift from the molten bones of Cinderglass into the upper firmament, where silence becomes song, and moonlight becomes language. The Moon Temples of Thirellen. Part 1. The eye that sang in silence high above Arithrea's dreaming skin, beyond cloud, beyond storm, beyond even the reach of wind, float the Moon Temples of Thirellen, adrift in the exosphere's hush. They do not orbit. They listen. Thirellen is not a place made of stone or bone. It is a city temple woven from moonlight threads and memory glass. Suspended in the tidal current between Arithrea's twin moons, Vale and Seren, the temples drift gently across invisible pathways carved by ancient chants. The Moonscribes who dwell there are not born to sight. They are born into silence. But they hear everything. The people of Thirellen are taught from birth to hear the world as music, not metaphorically, but truly. Each pulse of light, each wave of gravity, each distant star has its own vibration. Their minds are attuned not to spoken language, but to resonance, song lines etched into the very fabric of being. They speak through choral weaving, harmonies bound into meaning, sung not aloud but through the moon-bone threads in their throats, which pulse softly with light. From across the planet, leaders and seers send messages upward into the moons, hoping for an answer. But the Moonscribes reply only when the song is right, when it is true. The central temple is called Caelthrena, or the listening eye. It floats alone between Vale and Seren, tethered to each moon by threads of moon-boned silver. It has no windows, no doors, only an open atrium beneath the stars, where songs spiral upward into the void. And in its heart lives the eye singer. Her name was Ilyra, though no one spoke it. She was known only as Ilyra, she who remembers the moon's breath. She had been born during a rare eclipse, when both moons darkened at once and the tides below stilled. Her hair shimmered like lunar frost. Her skin bore faint sigils from birth, constellations no scholar could name. And unlike most moonscribes, she dreamed in colors. Unusual. Dangerous. But the temple kept her. Because when she sang, the stars paused to listen. Ilyra's gift was not only rare. It was wrong. At least, by Thirellen standards. She did not sing what was. She sang what had not yet come. Prophetic song-weaving was forbidden except by the high chorus. But her melodies bent time. She saw wars not yet begun. Spoke names not yet born. And in her latest vision song, sung alone at the edge of Thirellen's atrium, she named a flame. Not one of their order. Not a star. Not a memory. But a person. Severin. She sang softly, in tones shaped like pale gold. Flameborn. Shard-marked. Mountain daughter. She burns upward. And she carries a song not yet written. That name had never passed through Thirellen's resonance threads. No Cinderglass-born soul had ever been named by the moons. And yet it arrived, pulsing through the air like a summoned rhythm. Ilyra knew this was not a simple future. It was a convergence. She reported the vision to the high songkeeper, Iron Val, whose voice was so pure it once realigned a falling moon spire. He listened, thought, then spoke 2 words. It begins. In a hidden chamber known only to the Moonscribe sovereigns, buried deep in the chords beneath Thirellen's axis, rested a sealed aria. A song not sung in 900 years. Written in silence. Composed not in melody, but in echo. They called it The Last Moonfall. A prophecy of fire reaching the sky. Of mountain flame meeting lunar light. Of a song that would not be remembered, but invented. And it began with a name. Severin. The high chorus convened. Ilyra was summoned. The song has risen, they said. But the voice is not yet here. Then we must bring it, she answered. It cannot be summoned, said one elder. Flame does not rise by call. Ilyra lifted her eyes to the moons. No, she said. But it can be mirrored. In the atrium of Thirellen, a new choral weave was begun. Not a message. Not a vision. An invitation. Ilyra sang with her whole body, her moon-bone threads vibrating with piercing clarity. She sang not to the world, but through it. Her song crossed skies, melted through clouds, and shimmered downward in a spiral of pale silver. In Cinderglass, on a lonely mountain path, a wanderer paused mid-step as the wind grew strangely melodic. Severin raised her head and heard the moon calling. Part 2. The Flame That Learned to Listen. The call arrived at twilight, not that the mountains of Cinderglass observed twilight in any ordinary sense. The sky was smoke and glass, layered with ash haze and soft, star-like embers drifting upward from the molten rivers below. But on that evening, as Severin stood near the edge of a sulphur-cracked ridge overlooking the caldera fields, something strange passed through the air. It wasn't fire. Not scent. Not heat. It was resonance. A hum so precise it passed through her skin like breath and settled into her spine like memory. She turned slowly. The wind did not move. And yet the sound persisted, a melodic spiral unlike anything she had ever heard. It was soft, but vast, like listening to a song composed by the sky itself. Not Cinderglass. Not even the far-flung mountain chants of the Ashbourne. This was higher, thinner, cold with clarity. Then came a single phrase. Not spoken. Not shouted. but sung directly into her bones. Severin, she inhaled. The flame glass shard in her chest pulsed once, bright and pale blue, then stilled. This was not a dream, not a memory, not one of the wild ghost songs she sometimes heard in the still fire echoes. This was new. She made the climb in silence, ascending to the temple of fractured horizon, where flame callers kept vigil over the sky. Elder Marin awaited her, surrounded by a trio of hollow flame seers, all of whom turned to her the moment she entered. They heard it too, Marin said softly. The moons sang your name. Severin stood still, the shard at her chest now humming in a delicate tremble, like a string plucked by a god. The Thirellen? She asked. Marin nodded. It was a coral weave. No mistaking it. But altered. Ancient. It's a resonance no one has heard in generations. I don't know why they would call to me. Perhaps they don't either, one of the hollow flame seers murmured. Perhaps they're only listening for something the world is trying to say, and your voice was the echo that reached them. Severin looked out across the peaks. The flame is not finished, she said quietly. No, Marin agreed. But perhaps it needs a mirror. The passage to Thirellen was not a road. It was a convergence. Once every 10 cycles, the twin moons Veil and Saren drifted into resonance, an alignment that opened a pathway through the sky known as the Veil of Threads. Only those bound to certain frequencies, bearing particular flame or memory, could safely pass through its song. The Thirellen sent no ships. They sang a path into existence, and Severin stepped into it. She rose through the sky not with fire, but with silence. The Veil of Threads was not light. It was texture. A vast, vibrating ribbon of moon-tuned stillness that pulled her upward in rhythmic pulses. She passed beyond clouds, beyond weather, into the thin-breathed hush where Arithrea's stars began to shimmer like breath held too long. There, the moon temples of Thirellen revealed themselves. Structures of impossible grace, drifting in orbit like petals floating on a windless lake. Their surfaces shimmered with echo thread, moonbone lattices spun from silver and glass, each temple singing its own part of the grand harmony. At the center of it all hung Thirellen, vast and open, a hollowed sphere of woven lunar crystal, pulsing with layered harmonies that only the Moonscribes could read. Severin arrived without sound. Her feet touched down on moonlight stone, and the sky went still. They greeted her with song. Not words. Not gesture. A single harmonic thread passed through her, composed of layered tone and thought, unfolding in her mind like memory soaked in melody. You are seen. You are heard. You are welcome. Ilyra descended from the atrium steps in silence. Her hair shimmered like a moonlit river. Her eyes, though blind, reflected the stars. Her voice came not from her mouth, but from her throat, where moonbone chords pulsed visibly beneath her skin. Severin felt her presence like heat near glass. Are you the one who called me? She asked aloud. Ilyra nodded. You carry fire shaped like story. Her voice sang, gentle and clear. And the moons remember you. Severin's brow furrowed. They should not. I am no part of your line. You are now. They brought her into the coral vaults, where echo crystals hung in vast arcs, each one tuned to a specific song recorded in moonlight. Here, the Moonscribes did not preserve history, they preserved possibility. The songs that had not yet happened. The threads of stories that might unfold. One such crystal pulsed as they entered. It responded to Severin's presence. Ilyra reached toward it, and the crystal bloomed like a flower. From it emerged a resonance unlike any other, low, burning, a tone that flickered like flame. Severin flinched. "That is my third flame," she whispered. "No," Arithrea replied. "It is hers." The song inside the crystal was the echo of Thirellen. Unfinished. Fragmented. But unmistakable. And layered beneath it. A melody neither woman had ever heard. A lunar hymn with no known author, woven in threads of silence and sorrow. "She reached us once," Arithrea said. "Long ago. But the song was incomplete. Now with you, it awakens." For the next 6 nights, they studied the resonance. Arithrea translated. Severin listened. And slowly, the arc of the song became clear. It was not a message. Not a warning. It was a plea. A voice long erased, trying to sing itself back into existence, not to return as it was, but to become something else. Severin recognized the hunger. It was the same one that had stirred the ashless flame beneath Cinderglass. But this was different. This was a flame trying to harmonize. The moons, too, were changing. On the 7th night, during the shift between Vale and Saren's crossing, a shadow passed through both lunar bodies. Not physical. Not astronomical. A resonance void. The Moonscribes screamed in unison and fell silent. Arithrea collapsed. Severin caught her, cradling her as her moon-bone threads flickered erratically beneath her skin. From her mouth came a single name. Not hers. Not Severin's. Ilyra. Severin had never heard it before. But her shard burned. In the quiet that followed, Arithrea wept. She did not know why. Only that the moons had shown her something they had not shown anyone in 1,000 years. Not a future. Not a vision. But a memory of a future that might yet exist. And in that future, a moon sang a name it had never known. Ilyra, a soul born of both fire and resonance, bearer of a dual thread. "She is not born yet," Arithrea whispered. Severin nodded. "But she will be. And when she is, both Thirellen and Cinderglass must be ready. Because the song of Ilyra would not follow any known harmony. It would write its own sky." Part 3. The Symphony of What Must Never Be Sung. On the 9th night after Severin arrived in Thirellen, the moon veil bled. It was not seen from the world below, too faint, too high. But every moonscribe in orbit heard it. A thread snapped. Not in the sky. In the music. And when a single harmonic breaks in Thirellen, it is not a matter of pitch. It is a matter of prophecy. Arithrea sat in the hollow atrium, her voice silent for the first time since childhood. Her moon-bone chords pulsed with erratic glimmers, caught in some rhythm she could not soothe. She had not spoken aloud since the name Ilyra passed through her lips, unbidden, unknown, unforgettable. It was not just a name. It was a note. One that did not belong in any known scale. A dissonance so sharp it split dream from vision, memory from truth. She had heard it once before. Or rather, felt it. When she was a child, during the eclipse dissonance. A rare lunar event that had silenced the entire temple for 7 days. Back then, no one had known why. Now she understood. The moons had been listening. Waiting. Preparing for the moment the name would return. Severin stood at the outer rim of Thirellen, staring into the void between the moons. The stars pulsed with quiet urgency. Her flame glass shard hummed against her chest, not in pain, not in warning, but in expectation. Something was coming. Not soon. Now. A new song began to rise from the deep vaults, where no moonscribe had entered in centuries. These vaults were not chambers, but chords, sound locked in crystalline form, too ancient to risk unwinding. But the crystals had begun to fracture. Softly, beautifully, dangerously. The echoes that escaped sang of events that had not yet occurred. Cities falling upward into stars. Children with mirrored eyes and glass for skin. A fire that sang. A silence that devoured sound itself. And at the center of every strand, Ilyra. She was not yet born, but her song was already changing the music. The high chorus was divided. Some believed Ilyra to be a myth reflection, a resonance ghost conjured by the overlapping vibrations of two distinct lineages, the flameborn of Cinderglass and the coral-bound of Thirellen. Others whispered the forbidden. This is the song that must not be sung, the melody that unravels harmony, a becoming too vast to contain. Arithrea and Thirellen descended together into the coral wound, a spherical vault at the heart of Thirellen, where one can stand within silence so complete, it births echoes of things not yet voiced. It is not a place of meditation. It is a place of confrontation. The wound sings nothing unless the soul inside it has something worth answering. Thirellen stepped in first, and the silence cracked. Not from her. From something deep within the song itself. A new note rose, wavering, searching. Then a voice. Small, childlike, distant. I don't know who I am. Then quiet. Arithrea entered behind her. The wound pulsed once, twice. Then sang. You are not one. You are not two. You are the chord between. Thirellen fell to her knees. The flame in her chest flared white-hot, but did not burn. Instead it sang. A low, mournful tone, perfectly tuned to the echo Arithrea carried in her throat. Their harmonics merged, and the wound opened. They saw it. Not a vision, not a prophecy, but an event waiting to happen. A girl born beneath a lunar eclipse and a sky on fire. Her cry shattered glass. Her first word was a name no one had taught her. She would be neither Moonscribe nor Ashborn, but both, and neither. A new third thing. The first chord born. And her presence would change the harmony of Arithrea forever. But there was danger. The moment her voice entered the world, other harmonies would react. Some would seek to guide it, others to erase it. And something beneath the moon, something sealed long ago, would awaken. Not to destroy her, but to claim her. Arithrea and Thirellen emerged from the wound changed. Not in body, in resonance. Their threads were now attuned to Ilyra's melody. They would know the moment she was born. And they would have to protect her, because no one else could hear her song without being unmade by it. Not yet. That night, the stars fell silent. And in the hush between light and breath, the sky whispered. She is coming. Part 4. The name that sings the world anew. It began with a ripple. A vibration beneath the moons, faint as a heartbeat under stone. A harmony so delicate that most Moonscribes dismissed it as interference from the lower wind fields, until the sky changed color. For a single moment, both Veil and Thirellen shifted hue, not red, not blue, not silver, but something warmer, alive, pulsing like a breath held too long. And in that silence between pulses, Ilyra was born. Not in Cinderglass, not in Thirellen, but somewhere in between. In a pocket of air where fire and resonance converged, a place where no land held sway, only sky. A drifting birth, unanchored, uncharted. A girl suspended between forces, carried by wind and starlight alike. Ilyra felt it before the stars dimmed. So did Thirellen. Both women woke at the same instant, thousands of spans apart in their separate dream chambers, each with a shard burning at their core. Thirellen's flame flared violet, a rare hue that had only ever accompanied the stillbirth of volcano gods. Ilyra's moonbone threads pulsed in a rhythm that echoed laughter. Not her own. A child's. And it was singing. Neither spoke to one another. There was no need. The song had begun. Ilyra's presence in the world did not come with fire or prophecy. It came with harmonics. Across Arithrea, notes began to behave strangely. The tight choirs of Myrarceline found themselves humming chords they could not translate. Windbinders from the shattered skies of Caelrava reported echo loops, in their listening spirals, patterns not of past events, but of events yet to unfold. And in Cinderglass, the mountain glowed. Not with heat. With silence. A perfect, radiant hush that could only form when fire paused to listen. Thirellen stood at the edge of the flame vaults, her shard now heavier than ever. The pressure was not pain, it was anticipation. The world was listening, and it was waiting for her. In Thirellen, Ilyra summoned the high chorus and did what no Moonscribe had done in living memory. She broke a thread. A sacred cord, Arithrea, used only to bind the temples to lunar drift. She severed it with a song composed not in resonance, but in disruption. The temple shuddered. Moonlight bent. And for the first time since Thirellen was cast into orbit, Caelrava drifted off the moon's tether. The act was treason, and yet not one elder sang against her. Because they, too, had heard the song in their dreams. Because they, too, now remembered her name. They met in Skyfall. Between temple and caldera, between breath and flame, in the hollow place where the veil of threads had once opened. Ilyra arrived through a cone of silver sound, a vessel of echoes shaped into glide. Thirellen walked upward. Not metaphorically. She used the flame path, the ash-bound technique once taught only to sovereigns of the deep fire, to climb on cooled memory, step by molten step, until she stood beside Ilyra. And waiting between them, floating above a lattice of starlit threads, was a child. Not screaming. Not crying. Only humming. Ilyra. Her eyes were mirrored. Not like silver. Like memory glass. Not reflective. Refractive. They showed not what you were, but what you might become. She reached for Thirellen first, her hand warm but not burning. The moment they touched, the shard in Thirellen's chest shattered, not into dust, but into light. Then Ilyra turned to Ilyra and placed her other hand on the singer's throat. Ilyra's moonbone chords glowed. And from both women, in perfect unity, rose a tone so pure it stopped time. Every Moonscribe fell silent. Every ashborn paused mid-flame. The name Ilyra was no longer a sound. It was a frequency. A new fundamental. And with it came change. All over Arithrea, echoes shifted. In the dream vaults of the sand-bound cities of Valanketh, mirrored glyphs trembled in patterns not yet known. In the star-drowned chambers beneath the mirror tides, echo seers fell into harmonic sleep, unable to wake. In Caelrava, the sky tilted for a full quarter hour, spirals rotating backward. And beneath Cinderglass, the ashless flame stirred once more. But this time, it did not hunger. It sang. Ilyra's melody was not loud, not sharp. It was layered. 3 voices woven into one. The fire of Thirellen's memory. The song of Ilyra's moons. And something else. Something no one could name. Not yet. But it was coming. The two women stood there in silence, watching the girl between them hum to the stars. She did not look at them. She did not speak. She simply was. The first of a new thing. Neither Ashborn nor Moonscribe. Both. And more. Ilyra turned to Severin and spoke without music. A rare thing. A sacred breach. She cannot stay in Thirellen. Severin nodded. She cannot stay in Cinderglass. Then we build something else. Severin smiled faintly. A place between. Part 5. The temple that will never be finished. They did not descend. They did not return. They did not choose a land or a sky. They built. Not with stone. Not with fireglass or moonbone. But with resonance and intent. At the convergence point where Ilyra was born, where the threads of Thirellen's song met the spiral winds of Cinderglass, Arithrea and Severin began construction of a temple the world would never name. A sanctuary not of the past, not of prophecy, but of the possible. They called it simply the Between. It was not a structure. It was a song woven into air. A floating, spiraling lattice suspended in the upper firmament, built from harmonic flame and refracted echo. It shimmered like a mirage, barely visible from Arithrea below, but to those who could hear its resonance, it rang with a kind of welcome the world had forgotten how to give. The Between was the first of its kind. A home for those who carried unresolved chords. Children born to parents from opposing currents, fire-bound and dream-shaped, tide-born and sky-written. Beings who had no lineage, only potential. Ilyra grew quickly. Not in years, but in clarity. Her presence sharpened the world around her. Conversations slowed when she entered a room. Songs shifted key. Flame danced in geometric spirals instead of wild tongues. She did not speak often. When she did, the moons adjusted their orbits by a hair's breadth. Once, she looked out into the black and whispered, "That star is dying." 4 nights later, the seers of the river vault confirmed the collapse of a sun in the veiled arm. No one questioned her after that. But it was not her power that made her sacred. It was her limitlessness. She refused completion. Every attempt to define her ended in recursion. Every song composed in her name unraveled halfway through. Every flame she touched burned in 2 directions, forward and backward. Even her memory-glass eyes changed hue depending on who looked into them. She was, and was not at once. And so the Between took on her rhythm. It became a home not of permanence, but of revision. Every chamber reshaped itself according to need. Every path resang itself for the one who walked it. No map ever remained accurate. No flame ever repeated its form. The high chorus in Thirellen sent envoys to reclaim Arithrea. The Emberites of Cinderglass sent scrolls requesting Severin's return. Neither woman replied. They were no longer of the moons or the mountains. They were of Ilyra now. And the temple they were building would never be finished. Because it could not be. Because completion was not its purpose. Years passed. And with them, visitors came. A sand priest from the dreaming dunes of Valanketh, carrying a jar of memory silt that refused to settle. A sky wanderer from Kailrava whose wings had never formed, yet whose thoughts bent the wind. A tide-born child from Immerse who had never spoken aloud, yet could echo the sound of tears in perfect pitch. Each was welcomed. None were defined. All were listened to. And at the center of it all, Ilyra hummed. Not a melody. A question. Endless. Patient. Evolving. What else might I become? Then, one night, she vanished. Not suddenly. not mysteriously. She simply walked into the resonance field at the heart of the between, placed her palm on the core thread, and passed into it. The chamber shimmered once, resonated, and went still. Severin searched the temple. Ilyra sang her name. No echo returned. Only silence. But it was not absence. It was choice. In the years that followed, the between remained. Visitors continued to come. Stories continued to bend. And Ilyra's hum was still heard, sometimes in the walls, sometimes in the stars, sometimes in the hearts of those who had never met her. She had become the thread between voices, the name in every unspoken song, the flame in every dream that refused a shape. And so, when Severin passed into her final rekindling and Ilyra's chords faded into stillness, the temple did not mourn. It sang. Not a farewell. Not a hymn. A beginning. The between still floats in Arithrea's upper sky. It has no map. No creed. Only a promise etched in flame and echo at its threshold. You are welcome, even if you do not yet know what you are.